Hello you tracksuit tacticians, Screenster is my name, FM17 is my game, and today we'll be looking at my 3-4-2-1 tactic. And to briefly summarise, this tactic encourages attacking and possession based football, which will fit your club philosophies if you have them. It needs players with good physical stats, particularly pace, stamina, as we're using a very fluid system with a counter mentality. And I'm going to quickly talk you through not necessarily the players I have, but the sort of roles that I use, and the specific player instructions. So I use, to start with, a sweeper keeper attack. This is to sweep up any loose balls that come in behind the defence, and to, you know, basically be aggressive from the defence, so we can get the ball played up the field quickly, and we can encourage the counter attacks. And for specific instructions, I have distribute to the centre backs, I roll it out, and we also slow the pace down, so we can play it out of defence, and you don't have to have any ridiculously high passing stats with defence. We just need to make sure that we keep the ball, retain possession, and start building up the attack from the back. And in back three, I've got 3 ball-playing defenders, all stoppers, which is a little bit unorthodox, but they're all set to tackle harder and pass it shorter. So they will all stay in line, and they will all usually distribute it to the centre mids or to the wing backs. They won't try defence splitting passes up to the front three. I also have the middle guy set to close down much more, so he can push out and intercept the ball from the opposing forwards. I'll get onto the defensive line later in the specific team instructions. The wing backs, we have a whole host of player instructions here. So these guys will be shooting less often, as will most of the team. They'll be closing down more, tackling harder, marking tighter, more risky passes, sitting narrower, and cutting inside with the ball. Now, there's a justification for all these. Basically, even though it's funny, even though I've set shoot less often to wing backs, you still find they will get a few goals. Pretty much everyone is set to tackle harder, coincidentally, and what this will result in is a lot of yellow cards, but at the same time, it's actually useful for winning the ball back. And to be quite honest, if you have quite a large squad, then a few suspensions isn't really going to do you much harm, to be quite honest. So you might as well just take the yellow cards, or on occasions, the 2-footed tackles that go flying in. So yeah, just take the yellow cards, because ultimately your results will be better. More risky passes, yeah. The wing backs are going to be playing very aggressively, along with the centre mids and the front three. So they're going to be pushing very high up the pitch. So you want them to play more risky passes. So we can break at speed. That's because it fits in with the counter mentality and the very fluid team shape. And you also want them sitting narrower so that you can overload the middle of the park. Part of the reason why this tactic works so well is because the wing backs will often be coming in narrow, like this, into these sorts of areas. And you may also find them on the overlap, like this, and that's why they sometimes pop up with a few goals. And because they're going to be cutting inside, that obviously adds to the sit narrow instruction. An alternative to this would be to have inverted wing backs, but what I want is for this tactic to be useful at lower levels as well as the Premier League, which is what I have at the moment in this save. And you don't really find many inverted wing backs in the lower leagues of, say, Northern Ireland, which is where I started. So using standard wing backs, you're more likely to find players who are at least competent with that role. So yeah, the wing backs are very important to this tactic. You need wing-backs with good pace, and it's nice to have good natural fitness and good positioning as well. So yeah, wing-backs are very important in this tactic because, admittedly, width is where you're going to where you struggle with this tactic, if anywhere, because there may be the opposition may have some pacey wingers who may find it easy to go past your wing backs if they don't have enough pace. Part of the reason why I signed Cedric, actually, because he's still got a fair bit of pace about him, and he's quicker than my previous first choice, Shea Coleman. So onto the midfield. We play a ball-winning midfielder who shoots less often, marks tighter, and passes it shorter. Reason for this is because although we've got Harry Arter, who's pretty competent on the ball, normally a lot of lower league ball-winning midfielders don't have that much technical ability about them. Be good at tackling, good at marking, not necessarily great at passing. So you want them to usually offload the ball to the box-to-box midfielder or to the shadow strikers if they're in space. This guy will be picking up a lot of cards as well, but he'll be closing down the opposition and winning the ball quickly. So yeah, he's very useful to this tactic. Notice how we don't use any form of playmaker in the middle, mainly because advanced playmakers, deep line playmakers, and especially roam playmakers rely on a lot of stats that aren't very common in lower leagues. So you're not gonna need pace as, say, an advanced playmaker. Like you're just not. It's just not a thing. But for a ball-winning mid, they might be good at acceleration. I mean, that's not the best at 12, but 12 at a lower league for acceleration is pretty good. So, again, emphasis on players with good physical stats. Box-to-box midfielder, this guy is your engine. This guy will be up and down that pitch all day, just like the wing-backs, to be honest. A lot of instructions for him to shoot less often. It's dependent on the finishing. I mean, if your BBM has good finishing, Dave's got 11, so not really. Then you could take it off if you wanted to. I leave it on just in case, because a lot of box-to-box midfielders I have don't usually have the best finishing. They're usually quite suited to the central midfield role, and you can just train them to be a box-to-box. You want them tackling harder, marking tighter. Now this is important. More risky passes, getting further forward and moving into channels. This is actually quite important because that means he'll be going forward. He'll be going forward a lot more, which means he'll be supporting the front three and the on-rushing wing backs. Which means that at times you'll have 6, maybe even 7 players in the opposition's final third of the pitch. And the sheer overload in the middle is normally what causes a lot of this tactic to work most of the time. So those instructions for box-to-box midfielder are very important, I should say. Shadow strikers, we have shoot less often and tackle harder for both of them. You'll actually see them picking up a few goals alongside the deep line forwards, who I didn't actually set any instructions for. Although if you wanted to, you could have him shooting more often if you think he's a good finisher. Ings is he's okay. I mean, I'll leave it off for now, but yeah, your deep line forward is going to be drawing out the opposition defence, because sometimes he'll be coming into sort of the attacking midfield positions for the shadow strikers to push further forward, or even the wing backs as they start cutting inside. And what this does is that one of the opposition defenders will usually come out, and that creates space in behind for us to exploit. So he has to be good at that. More risky passes. Basically, you want a forward who has some form of passing ability. 12 is usually okay. If you're at lower league, 10's probably fine. Perhaps even 9 or 8 if you go really far down. Yeah, and also your deep line forward will be getting a lot of goals as well, so don't worry about goal scoring. I think Ings, how many's he got this season? Yeah, 18 in 20 games, which is quite something for a player of his calibre. Although he's a good Prem player on this save. So moving on to the team instructions, we play using a counter mentality for obviously starting the counter attacks, which it's actually especially useful against the bigger teams, and also a very fluid shape, so we can get that ball up as quickly as possible. We play narrow, so we can overload the middle of the pitch. We use the offside trap because sometimes you're caught short at the back with only your 3 centre backs. So we do want to try and use the offside trap to prevent players from getting in behind. You could adjust the defensive line if you wanted to, but if you put it up too high, then the offside trap isn't going to work because the players are going to get in behind too often. I mean, there's being aggressive and there's playing way too high, so I just leave it on normal. You could slightly deeper if you wanted to, but if you go too deep, then it's going to conflict with the closing down. We have more closing down, so we can try and win the ball back as quick as possible. We don't want much more because we want some form of team shape. Okay, we want, although we want a very fluid system, we want players not to roam from positions, which is why I've not ticked from this. So you don't want the team shape to be too much, but you want some form of pressing. So that's why we set it to more. We prevent short keeper distribution. We pass to space and we play out defence. And the rest is and low crosses, but the rest is pretty much up to you. I personally wouldn't get stuck in, seeing as a lot of players are already on tackle harder. You could tick stealthy if you wanted to. Depending on how the game's going, you can choose to go more direct with your passing, or you can retain possession if you want to, but normally your team will dominate possession. Well, not necessarily dominate, but they'll usually have more than 50%, even against the big teams. You don't really need to look for overlap, to be honest, because the wing backs are already getting high up the pitch anyway. And we have low crosses because the deep line forward isn't necessarily a great header of the ball. But if you put a forward with more physical presence, you can start floating crosses or whipping them in if you want to. But I personally prefer low crosses. Up to you though. Yeah, you can choose to be more expressive, freedom of movement, and also dribbling. I just leave it off as it is, and it usually works fine. And if the opposition's got a particular weakness, then you can choose to exploit one of the flanks or exploit the middle. Again, up to you, depends on how the game's going. So now I feel it's time to show you some of the results we've had. I should mention this is a save where I've been moving from club to club, and Everton is my biggest club yet. I started unemployed and I've worked my way up. I'm halfway through my first full season. Got the Merseyside derby coming up next. But here are the results. We're second in the Premier League, 3 points off United, who I don't think we're going to catch, but Champions League with Everton is pretty good, I must say. And yeah, here are the results for this season. I took over midway through last season, but a few highlights. 5-1 against Leicester. Danny Ings scored a hat-trick. And look at the stats right here. Absolutely dominated. 25 shots, 11 were on target. What you'll sometimes find is your team will have a lot of long shots, and this can be frustrating if your shadow strikers don't have good finishing. So if that is the case and you're having a lot of long shots, they're all going off target, you're not really testing the keeper, then try working the ball into the box, and yeah, just try and go from there, because obviously if it's not working, change it up, right? Normally this tactic does work, but sometimes it can be difficult to, you know, break down teams who are ultra defensive. So in which case, just cool off the long shots a bit. Possession 63%. which is probably slightly more than I'd want. Normally 60 is about where I'd aim for, but not too bad. And look at the passing. This is pretty important. Obviously, completing more passes because we dominated possession. And what I usually find is important is the high pass completion. So we have a 75% pass completion from defence, which shows we are building out from the back. Sometimes your keeper will go long if there are no options in the defence to pass to. So make sure that your keeper has somewhat competent kicking as well as passing. Doesn't matter too much though. But as you can see, Leicester were going long with their pass and defence, only 49% completion, we were playing short. And again, slightly higher completion in the midfield and the attack. We won more headers from the other team, and we didn't actually run as far, but our average rating was much better than theirs. So yeah, you can see the stats, they don't lie. We've had a few unlucky defeats, mostly narrow defeats, apart from the 3-1 against Braga, where I played my reserves in the final Europa League game. Just going to show you the narrow loss to United actually, where we got completely played off the park, which is a rarity. But what were United playing in that game? Oh right, 4-3-1. It's just sometimes this formation can be a bit susceptible against 4-1-4-1, so you want to be careful when that comes up. If the opposition's using the width, I'd say take it to them. Use the width as well. Get your wing backs to play wider, and just sort of see where that takes you, because sometimes you will want to match the width, because if you play too narrow then the opposition has far too much space and they can just whip in balls all day long. And if your defence isn't great, I mean, that's okay, but it's not the best, then yeah, you'll want to be matching the width at least, because sometimes the width is what gets done on this. But we still had 53% possession, and we still had a very high pass completion. So you know, it was a narrow defeat. We still did well. Probably the toughest game of the season, away to United. But yeah, not too bad at all. About the loss against Chelsea, did we dominate that? Yeah, I mean, you could say we should have got a draw out of that. Not too many long shots. Decent pass completion. Probably not as good as I normally would have liked. The defence is a little bit low. But yeah, I took over here in January. 1st of January was my first league game, 0-0 against Palace. Absolutely dominated. Look at that. 24 shots, 12 on target. Palace only had for 1 shot, so was fuming. We should have won that. But I at least took the team from 18th to 8th, and we won the FA Cup, which meant we got into the Europa League. Probably the highlight of the season was thrashing Stoke 6-1 in the Cup. Yeah, I mean, the stats sort of speak for themselves, really. We completely dominated in the possession, completely dominated in the passing, and the number of shots we had. Yeah, this tactic is very good for creating chances, which is why it fits into the club philosophies. Now, if I look at this save a bit more, job history? Yeah, job history. I had quite a career actually. I started. Why I mentioned Northern Ireland was because I started with Dundela in the Northern Irish Intermediate Prem, and we won the league, and we played a similar sort of tactic to what you're seeing here. One of the issues with lower leagues, I will say now, is the lack of good ball-playing defenders. So if you feel you need to, you can always switch for ball-playing defenders to central defender stopper if you want to. I mean, usually it doesn't matter too much because the ball-playing defenders are going to be passing it short anyway, but I did see 1 or 2 mistakes in the passing, so I did switch them to central defenders. And the pass completion got a lot better there. So that's what we did in Northern Ireland, but we still had wing backs, and we had a box-to-box to the ball winner. Shadow strikers can be hard to come across, so honestly, if you need to train full-backs to wing-backs or advanced playmakers or attacking midfielders to shadow strikers, then so be it, because they're quite hard to come across specifically, but usually they'll be at least competent in those roles already. So feel free to train players. I mean, my individual, I've got players basically training for pretty much everything. I'm not sure why he's on complete wing back. But yeah, I always set my individual training at the start of the season. Signings, if you're interested. Yeah, not too much. The club's in debt, basically, so we don't have that much. Don't have that much cash to spend. So I basically just from last year to the strength in depth. Got Cedric from Southampton, who's a quick wing back. Not necessarily a long-term replacement, but I think I'm gonna win the UCL in a couple of seasons, so it should be good. Got this guy from Juventus, not going to butcher for pronunciation, but he's a good shadow striker. Very versatile as well, could also play wing back and centre mid if needed. Dretcher Willems, good wing back, bit injury prone, but again, decent physicals and good crossing as well, which sometimes helps. As your wing backs will be getting further forward, they will often be the ones to play the crosses. So that's important. He's a key player for the team, actually. Schmeichel on a free transfer, backup keeper, and also youth team coach. Basically needs a backup keeper. My first team keeper is very good, but just needed cover in case. Sebastian Rudy on loan from Bayern Munich, again another versatile player. Centre mid, wing back, shadow striker if needed. A pinch. I'm actually trading him at left wing back, but that's not really going anywhere. And we got a Turkish regen from Stoke, who's good cover for the defence. Again, good physicals. It's mainly what you need. And you know, the basics: heading, marking, tackling. Again, you see, he's not the greatest at passing, but if you look at his pass completion stats, what about 68% overall. It's not brilliant, but you can do a lot worse. So yeah, that's the 3-4-2-1. I will upload this to Steam Workshop at some point. You want to check the description in the near future. And yeah, just one last thing to say. I've seen a lot of similar tactics like this. I saw someone used a deep line playmaker and a roaming playmaker in centre mid, along with inverted wing backs. And I've already mentioned about the inverted wing backs being too specialised, and it's the same sort of thing with a roaming playmaker. I mean, when are you going to find a roaming playmaker in the National League or the Northern Irish Third Division? You know, it's just not going to happen. You might find them at the top leagues, but if you're doing what I did, you're doing a bit of a journeyman save, you're starting at the bottom, working your way up, then it's probably best not to use a roaming playmaker. Yeah, so that is everything, and I'll probably will do more FM17 content in the near future. I've got an FM Scout challenge I still need to play, which is actually very difficult, and I probably won't be using this tactic because it's just not very suited to the players we have. But you'll see more of that when we actually get there. So yeah, thanks for watching, and please, as always, until next time, go away.